You're not going to believe this. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis drew a map, but not just any map, because at the bottom edge of this ancient parchment lies something impossible, a perfect outline of Antarctica without ice. That's right, a map drawn 300 years before humans officially discovered the South Pole. How did he know? Who showed him? And why was most of the original chart cut away and hidden? What you're about to hear isn't just the story of a map, it's the story of a secret buried for thousands of years, linking Templar knights, lost libraries, forbidden archives, and a truth that history has tried to erase. If you think history is settled, think again. From the libraries of Constantinople to the frozen walls of Antarctica, from the Templars to NASA, everything connects. This is the Piri Reis map, the map humanity was never meant to find. Hit subscribe, because what lies beneath the ice could rewrite everything we thought we knew about our past. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral produced a map whose existence defies conventional historical understanding. Its contours and coastlines diverge significantly from the cartographic paradigms of its era. Yet, along its lower edge, an impossible depiction emerges. A jagged line uncannily accurate in its representation of the northern coast of Antarctica. This is not Antarctica as it appears today, entombed beneath miles of ice, but rather as it would have looked millennia ago, ice-free, meticulously detailed and charted. This level of precision transcends mere speculation. It is an accuracy that defies explanation, considering no satellite, aerial survey, or naval vessel had yet reached those remote latitudes. This raises a profound question. Who possessed knowledge of Antarctica before modern exploration commenced? This narrative transcends a mere discussion of maps or frozen landscapes. It delves into the realm of hidden memory and knowledge transmitted through clandestine channels, including secured repositories, deliberate silence, and possibly even symbolic implements of power. The brittle parchment, with its faded ink and curling corners, holds implications that could necessitate a re-evaluation of historical timelines. The Piri Reis map, named after the admiral responsible for its compilation, is more than a historical artifact. It is an intricate enigma. It alludes to vanished explorers, lost libraries, and secret fraternities that endeavored to preserve knowledge which others sought to erase. Tonight, we endeavor to trace a clandestine path extending from the ancient libraries of Constantinople to the formidable ice walls of the southern continent. This journey spans from the historical actions of Crusader knights to the advanced satellite feeds of contemporary scientists. Somewhere between the enigmatic Templars and Antarctica, a continuous thread exists, one that may elucidate how medieval cartographers depicted lands they theoretically should never have observed. As this thread is investigated further, the perceived reality of the world becomes increasingly perplexing. The admiral, Piri Reis, never physically journeyed to Antarctica. He did not witness its glaciers or experience the sub-zero winds that sweep across its ancient rock formations. Nevertheless, in 1513, he applied brush to parchment, creating a mystery so profound that its implications continue to resonate across centuries. Drawn on gazelle skin and meticulously assembled from older source materials, his map offers a representation of the Antarctic coast that was not intended for public knowledge, a near-perfect depiction of the continent before its extensive glaciation. It is important to note that this is not the Antarctica recognizable to us. The Piri Reis map portrays the continent as it would have appeared over 6,000 years ago, with its northern coastline exposed and unmarred by glaciers. The distinct outline of Queen Maud Land appears to emerge, a spectral glimpse of a world that should not have been visible, let alone charted, in the 16th century. Yet, it is undeniably present, with slopes and curves that align remarkably with modern seismic scans conducted beneath the ice. Piri Reis himself acknowledged that he did not create the map independently. He stated that he compiled it from charts left by ancient mariners, some of Arabic origin, some Portuguese, and, according to his marginal notes, some dating back to the era of Alexander the Great. This revelation alone provokes considerable intrigue. While his contemporaries were engaged in debates regarding the Earth's spherical nature, Reis was sketching coastlines that remained beyond their collective imagination. The official explanation for this anomaly has long posited that the Piri Reis map simply misrepresents South America or contains cartographic errors, often termed cartographic anomalies. However, this narrative begins to falter when the coastlines are meticulously compared with modern satellite imagery. The resemblance is not merely vague, it is strikingly precise. Geological features, concealed under thousands of feet of ice for millennia, curve and dip exactly where the map indicates. Is this a fortuitous guess or evidence of something more profound? Some scholars have attempted to bridge this discrepancy by suggesting a form of cartographic telephone game, where ancient maps were successively copied and distorted, with each reproduction introducing new inaccuracies, until Race eventually compiled them into a cartographic Frankenstein. Yet, if this were accurate, the resulting map should exhibit chaotic, random distortions, misaligned borders, and artistic liberties. Instead, one observes a remarkable consistency of form, particularly along the southern arc, an accuracy too precise for myth and too premature for scientific methods of the time. What renders this map even more unsettling is the missing information. Race reportedly managed to preserve only 1/3 of the original chart. The remainder, according to historical accounts, was either lost or destroyed. Consequently, if Antarctica occupies the periphery of what remains, one must ponder what occupied the center. If this fragment represents merely the edge of forbidden knowledge, what profound insights once constituted its core? This line of inquiry swiftly transcends mere curiosity, venturing into territory that approaches heresy in the estimation of traditional historians. For if the map is indeed authentic, accurate, and derived from ancient sources, it implies a level of ancient maritime knowledge that should simply not exist. It suggests a pre-modern civilization possessing global awareness, advanced technical sophistication, and perhaps a compelling motive to discreetly preserve its findings. At this juncture, the Knights Templar subtly enter the periphery of consideration. They were, after all, renowned collectors of ancient knowledge. From their excavations beneath Solomon's Temple to the whispered accounts of libraries in the Levant, the Templars reportedly accessed artifacts and manuscripts otherwise lost to time. Could one of these acquisitions have been a chart, fragments of an older map, meticulously copied and safeguarded across centuries? This proposition may appear fantastical until one recalls that cartography, akin to power, has historically been a closely guarded treasure. To control the map was to control the perception of the known world. This may explain why the Piri Reis map was not widely disseminated, and why many of the other ancient charts he cited have mysteriously disappeared, either consumed by fire, buried, or secreted behind thick stone walls. Indeed, some knowledge is inherently dangerous. The quiet paradox here is that Piri Reis was not regarded as a madman. He was a respected admiral in the Ottoman Navy, a brilliant navigator, and a court scholar. When he was executed, yes, executed, it was not for forgery, but for insubordination, following a failed naval campaign. Yet, his map, that peculiar fragment on gazelle skin, endured. It remained tucked away in the Topkapi Palace for centuries, awaiting recognition. Scholars continue to debate the authenticity of his source materials. Some propose that the alignment with Antarctica is coincidental, or that Race misinterpreted the contours of South America. Others, such as Charles Hapgood, contend that the Piri Reis map serves as evidence of a lost civilization with advanced geodesy that once circumnavigated the globe. Most academics tend to dismiss this latter idea, partly because it disrupts established historical timelines. However, even those who refute the theory rarely provide a comprehensive explanation for how the map accurately depicted Antarctica's shape centuries before it was correctly charted in textbooks. The conversation regarding this map continues to propagate. Did Race work from a Crusader copy of an Alexandrian map? Did the Knights of Christ, descendants of the Templars, protect these charts during Portugal's Age of Exploration? If so, why did they not disclose what they knew? What purpose does a map serve if not for conquest, exploration, or territorial claim? Perhaps the true clue resides not in what the Piri Reis map explicitly displays, but in what it deliberately conceals. A coastline rendered with painstaking detail, yet devoid of notes, names, or labels, merely curves in the ice. It is as if the original cartographer observed something, meticulously recorded it, but either failed to comprehend its significance or, conversely, understood it too profoundly and chose discretion. There exists a subtle distinction between omission and concealment. The former denotes forgetfulness, the latter, deliberate design. Piri Reis left behind subtle clues notations scribbled in the margins that resemble quiet confessions. He never claimed personal genius, only stewardship. His map, he stated, was meticulously assembled from approximately 20 charts and Maimundi, some of which dated back to the era of Alexander the Great. Others, he admitted, originated from unnamed Portuguese sailors. The implication is chilling in its simplicity. He was replicating something far older, far more precise, and far more forgotten than anyone realized. That casual reference to Alexander's era might initially seem preposterous, yet the more one examines the marginalia, the more the questions multiply. If even one of those source maps originated in classical antiquity or earlier, then the cartographic lineage of the Piri race map extends far beyond the conventional age of exploration, reaching into a nebulous period where history merges with mythology. This is where the narrative becomes profoundly intriguing. According to Race, one of his most invaluable sources was purportedly acquired from a Spanish sailor by a group of Turkish pirates. This sailor, in turn, claimed to have inherited it from a navigator who had been trained under Christopher Columbus himself. One might anticipate such a narrative to lead westward, toward the New World, but instead, it directs southward, toward the bottom of the world. The closer one follows this ink trail, the more it appears that the true treasure was not gold, but rather preserved memory. A subtle but persistent pattern emerges. These ancient sources do not merely describe known lands with exaggerated flair, they depict unknown coastlines with remarkable mathematical precision. Many of the features they delineate, such as the Andes Mountains or the rivers of West Africa, are accurately positioned, despite being only partially charted by contemporary explorers. It is as if an ancient observer once possessed a comprehensive view of the entire Earth, subsequently transmitting fragments of that vision as if they were sacred relics. Naturally, mainstream historians are swift to offer alternative explanations. Perhaps the ancient Greeks extrapolated coastlines through advanced geometry and astronomy. Perhaps Islamic scholars, with their notable intellectual achievements, refined and expanded upon Greek data. Perhaps early Portuguese explorers ventured farther than they officially documented. These are all valid points until one observes how many of these purported alternative sources were subsequently lost, consumed by library fires, sunk with ships, or deliberately concealed in the name of empire or religious dogma. Yet, certain fragments miraculously survived in places such as Topkapi Palace, private libraries, and monastic vaults no longer accessible to the public. These remnants are insufficient to reconstruct a complete world map, but they are just enough to serve as a poignant reminder that someone once attempted such a feat, someone who not only charted coastlines but also remembered them. If any single figure embodies that forgotten memory, it might be Eratosthenes, the Greek mathematician who calculated the Earth's circumference over 2,000 years ago using rudimentary shadows and sticks. He oversaw the Library of Alexandria, which itself was rumored to house knowledge from across Africa, the Middle East, and even India. Some speculate that mariners conveyed reports of southern lands to Alexandria long before the concept of Antarctica was even conceived. If so, those records would have been meticulously copied, catalogued, and potentially transmitted through generations until the catastrophic fires. This is where the demarcation between source material and civilization begins to blur. For when knowledge persists long after its creators have vanished, it transforms into something else, a ghost. One can trace the outline of the original, but the hand that once guided the compass remains nameless. An echo of this enduring mystery even resonates in the writings of the ancient historian Pomponius Mela, who, in the 1st century AD, described a fourth continent situated beyond the known world. He referred to it as Terra Australis, an unknown southern landmass. At that time, no European had ever sighted Antarctica, yet the concept existed abstract perhaps, but undeniably persistent. The Islamic cartographers of the medieval period augmented this abstract idea with new layers of detail. Al-Idrisi, working in the 12th century under the patronage of King Roger II of Sicily, compiled one of the most comprehensive world maps of his era. This map was not derived from imagination, but from centuries of accumulated trade, travel, and translation. His maps subtly hinted at land masses situated below the equator, informed by travelers' accounts that did not conform to the known geography of Africa. Were these merely garbled renditions of Southeast Asia, or were they fleeting glimpses of contact with something even farther south? It is within this confluence of known and unknown that the theory of a forgotten civilization takes root, not one involving flying saucers or extraterrestrials, building pyramids, but a culture sufficiently advanced to chart coastlines with astonishing accuracy and sufficiently secretive to vanish behind a veil of myth. This is not Atlantis, but perhaps something older, something quieter. Hapgood, the controversial academic who dared to propose this, believed that ancient mariners utilized spherical trigonometry long before its supposed invention. His theory of crustal displacement, that Antarctica was once situated farther north and was ice-free, thereby allowing early civilizations to explore it, may have been widely dismissed. However, it garnered unexpected support from none other than Albert Einstein. Even though modern science has largely set aside the crustal shift hypothesis, the central question remains unanswered. How did anyone chart Antarctica with such precision without ever having seen it? At this juncture, the various strands of inquiry begin to intertwine in peculiar ways. A few Renaissance scholars, notably Gerardus Mercator, alluded to using older maps inherited through mysterious sources. Mercator even documented ancient mariners who reportedly reached the North Pole, guided by magnetic forces and powerful whirlpools. These individuals were not typical sailors. They were custodians of knowledge, echoing the archetypes described in Arab tales of the Sea of Darkness, or in ancient Sanskrit references to submerged continents and sunken libraries. Thus, the concept of a hidden lineage grows stronger. Perhaps it was not a single lost civilization, but rather a continuous chain of knowledge bearers, each preserving fragments of an older world. Among them, the Templars might have played a role, not in discovering new lands, but in safeguarding the knowledge of ancient ones. After all, it is well established that the Templars were more than mere warriors. They were financiers, engineers, and builders, individuals who valued information, particularly when it conferred power. They meticulously searched the Holy Land for relics, but perhaps what they truly coveted was data, charts, writings, items extracted from dusty scrolls that would later be deemed heretical or simply incredible. It would not have been an unprecedented instance of sacred knowledge being perceived as a threat. The Cathars were persecuted for their secrets. The Gnostics were systematically erased for their challenging questions. Is it plausible that, amidst the ruins of these purges, fragments of pre-glacial cartography were clandestinely removed, hidden in monasteries, interred within stone chapels, or encoded into symbols too obscure for monarchs and inquisitors to discern? If so, who today holds the key to comprehending those fragments? While many of the ancient sources cited by Piri Reis have vanished, a few enigmatic documents have emerged in recent years. Partially burned scrolls in Jesuit archives, ocean charts with southern latitudes redacted, and letters exchanged between explorers warning against sailing too far south of Cape Horn. These do not constitute definitive proof, but rather suggestive hints and fleeting glimpses. The most disquieting aspect is the absence of a clear break in this chain, from Piri Reis to his predecessors, from them to the cartographers of Alexander's era, and from them to a point where no names, no cities, just outlines in the ice and whispers on vellum remain. Antarctica continues to exist, vast and silent, largely unmarked, unmapped, and unremembered by most of recorded history, yet somehow its form was accurately delineated. This leads to the question that few academics openly pose. If the source material predates our recorded history, then what was its origin? Was it a forgotten empire with ocean-going vessels and geodetic instruments? A priesthood of astronomer-sailors who observed the stars and etched coastlines by torchlight? Or perhaps something even more commonplace, yet no less extraordinary, a culture that retained what it had observed long after the wider world had forgotten it? For sometimes, forgetting is not the absence of knowledge, it is an act of survival. Long before snow encased its secrets, before wind sculpted its ridges, and before ice claimed every crevice, Antarctica may have presented a strikingly different appearance. This is not merely a theoretical construct, but a geological reality. By removing the glaciers, which are up to 3 miles thick in certain areas, one uncovers a continent of mountains, valleys, freshwater lakes, and coastlines as intricate as any in Europe. Here lies the provocative assertion: it was not always frozen. According to mainstream paleoclimatology, substantial portions of Antarctica were ice-free as recently as 6,000 years ago, particularly along the Queen Maud Land coast, the very region curiously depicted on the Piri Reis map. In fact, sediment core analysis and ice-penetrating radar reveal a startling truth. This part of the continent once supported temperate conditions, rivers, and potentially even plant life. This leads to a proposition that, while unconventional, is difficult to avoid. Did a human presence walk those coasts before they were sealed in ice? Naturally, immediate objections are raised. The notion of ancient humans exploring Antarctica is frequently dismissed as speculative and peripheral. After all, the distances are immense, the temperatures harsh, and the logistical challenges appear insurmountable unless, of course, they were not. If the land was once warmer or situated closer to other known territories due to shifting tectonic plates, or simply made accessible by favorable oceanic currents, the perspective changes. What was once deemed unreachable becomes merely remote. What was frozen becomes potentially fertile. The Earth's axis undergoes slight wobbles over millennia, resulting in slow but significant climate variations. The Holocene climatic optimum, a warmer period spanning approximately 9,000 to 5,000 years ago, offered temperatures sufficiently high to induce melting along glacial edges in both polar regions. During this epoch, northern Europe was characterized by lush forests, the Sahara by a green savanna, and indeed, Antarctica's coastlines may have experienced a partial thaw. This is not mere conjecture. It is substantiated by evidence preserved within the ice itself. Deep within the glacial layers, scientists have discovered pockets of pollen, volcanic ash, and even ancient microbes, all indicative of an active, dynamic environment profoundly different from the one observed today. In one particularly compelling study, cores extracted from Lake Vostok, sealed beneath 2 miles of ice, exhibit signs of freshwater ecosystems dating back thousands of years, a buried oasis, a lost biosphere. Thus, the foundation of the mystery deepens. The Piri Reis map may not be a fantasy, it may be a memory. If this hypothesis holds true, then a human presence, somewhere, observed Antarctica before its glaciation, whether by seafaring or by land bridge, whether through gradual migration or sudden flight, they were there. But who were these individuals? Some theories point to the Phoenicians, seafaring traders renowned for reaching seemingly impossible ports. Others allude to the ancient Egyptians, whose knowledge of astronomy and geography far surpassed that of their contemporaries. A few even speculate about the remnants of prehistoric civilizations eradicated by floods, comets, or the inexorable march of time itself. While none of these theories are presently accepted by the academic mainstream, each contains a scintilla of plausibility, shrouded in centuries of silence. Geological records suggest that the last major ice sheet to envelop Antarctica may have formed rapidly, potentially within less than a century, triggered by a cascade of volcanic events or an abrupt shift in oceanic currents. If this occurred, any culture inhabiting its shores would have been buried within a single lifetime, and any record of their existence would now reside under millions of tons of pressure. This makes the very existence of the Piri Reis map even more extraordinary. It is crucial to recall that the map's coastline does not correspond to the modern icy shoreline. Rather, it matches the subglacial bedrock, the hidden anatomy of the continent, a feature no one observed until the 20th century. Here we possess a 16th century document that, somehow, depicted this accurately. Not perfectly, perhaps not with every fjord and ridge, but sufficiently close to provoke scrutiny from a glaciologist. Some have attempted to dismiss this as artistic license or pure coincidence, but cartographers understand the precision required. Coastlines are unforgiving in their detail. A bay inaccurately drawn represents a misunderstanding of the terrain. An exaggerated peninsula is a navigational hazard awaiting a shipwreck. Yet, this fragment of gazelle skin captured the essence of a land that no one was supposed to know existed, let alone confidently depict. It is at this point that uncomfortable questions resurface. If ancient humans once had access to that region, what else might they have recorded on stone, parchment, or through oral tradition? And who might have preserved that memory, passing it from hand to hand like a glowing ember shielded from a storm? Inevitably, one returns to the Templars, not for their ships or swords, but for their archives, their inclination for coded symbols and relics. They were not merely religious warriors, they were curators. They dispatched emissaries to Constantinople, Jerusalem, and Cairo. They established networks of storage libraries beneath castles and secret chambers within their commanderies. If any group had cause to safeguard ancient knowledge deemed too controversial for the church, it was they. And if they happened upon maps or records of Antarctica during their excavations beneath the Temple Mount or through their dealings with Eastern scholars, they would have exercised discretion. It would have been deemed preferable to conceal a dangerous truth than to allow it to be distorted by monarchs or priests. Perhaps they entrusted it to trusted navigators, obscuring its origin with symbols or encoding it in geometry and gold. Perhaps they passed it to Portugal, where their surviving brethren, the Order of Christ, quietly inaugurated the Age of Discovery. And perhaps, just perhaps, one of those navigators whispered its existence to a pirate, who revealed it to a scholar, who then conveyed it to Piri Reis. Thus, it transitioned from ice-free coastlines to faded ink, from memory to myth. In 1946, a mere year after the conclusion of World War II, the United States launched Operation High Jump, the largest military expedition ever dispatched to Antarctica. 13 ships, including aircraft carriers, destroyers, and icebreakers, formed an entire flotilla surging towards the southern pole. Officially, this was designated a training exercise. Unofficially, the narrative begins to diverge significantly. Led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a polar explorer already steeped in both myth and military accolades, the operation was projected to last 6 to 8 months. It concluded abruptly after only a few weeks. No official reason was publicly provided, only a swift retreat, a flurry of logistical reports, and Admiral Byrd's cryptic remarks in a subsequent South American newspaper interview. He reportedly warned of a potential threat from flying machines that could travel from pole to pole at incredible speed. That interview subsequently vanished. The newspapers retracted it, and public discourse reverted to pretending it had never occurred. Let us re-examine this. Why dispatch nearly 5,000 personnel, equipped with tanks, aircraft, and weaponry, to the coldest, most desolate place on Earth, immediately following the bloodiest conflict in human history? The war had concluded. The world was engaged in rebuilding. Why the urgency? Some theorists propose that the military harbored concerns that the Nazis had established a clandestine base in Queen Maud Land, allegedly designated Base 211, during the war. This narrative, though enveloped in speculation, gained traction due to Nazi Germany's unusual preoccupation with Antarctica. They had indeed dispatched an expedition there in 1938, deploying aluminum darts emblazoned with swastikas to assert territorial claims and meticulously mapping the region with an uncharacteristic precision for that era. The theory posits that fleeing officers, perhaps even scientists, escaped southward as the Third Reich collapsed. Submarines vanished, resources were reallocated, and vessels silently turned south. Were they seeking refuge in something, or fleeing from it? Operation High Jump commenced its operations not far from this very region. Was this a mere coincidence or a targeted directive? Byrd's task force was equipped for more than routine cold weather drills. They possessed amphibious aircraft, radar, and reconnaissance gear, strongly suggesting a mission to locate something, or someone. What they actually discovered has never been declassified. Official records cite adverse weather conditions, mechanical failures, and the inherent difficulties of polar navigation. However, informal networks, constructed from declassified telegrams, redacted memos, and the accounts of a few distressed pilots allude to alternative phenomena, sudden magnetic anomalies, aircraft damaged by unknown forces, and radio contact lost, then re-established amidst panicked static. Admiral Byrd himself, upon his return, was reportedly altered distant and unwilling to provide extensive testimony. Now, consider the Templar connection. It might seem implausible. Crusader knights in white mantles with red crosses somehow linked to a mid-20th century military expedition. Yet, peculiar associations cling to Antarctica like frost, and the Templars, or more precisely the knowledge they may have preserved, reappear in the most unexpected corners of history. One of the more obscure claims concerning Operation High Jump emanates not from military personnel but from researchers meticulously examining Vatican library logs. A specific folio, allegedly connected to early Templar holdings, was reportedly reviewed by 2 German Jesuits in 1943. It described a land of purity, encircled in cold, where God's angels once stood watch at the axis of the earth. The phrasing is poetic and enigmatic, but the crudely drawn coordinates purportedly match a segment of Queen Maud Land. That folio has not been seen since. This brings us back to the premise that Operation High Jump may have been more than it outwardly appeared, not merely a mission of territorial assertion and cold weather endurance, but one of recovery or interception. If, by some means, ancient knowledge had survived, be it Nazi, Templar, or something even more primordial, then Antarctica was not a blank slate, it was a vault, and the United States sought access. This was not the sole unusual maneuver during that period. The Soviets launched their own polar operations shortly thereafter, despite possessing more pressing post-war concerns. Britain, too, made quiet advances into the southern regions, establishing bases and deploying scientists, often without public fanfare. Something was drawing the world's superpowers to the very edge of the map, and it was not merely penguins or meteorological balloons. One must also consider the growing number of classified U.S. Navy documents that remain sealed from public scrutiny, some not slated for declassification until 2045. If Operation High Jump was a failure, why the extensive secrecy? If it was a success, what precisely did they discover? Ice cores, oil reserves, or something buried much deeper? One might deem it coincidental, but within 5 years of the operation, the Antarctic Treaty was signed, a remarkable international agreement that prohibited military activity, mining, and territorial claims across the entire continent. All nations agreed, almost with undue haste, that Antarctica would remain a peaceful scientific preserve. How frequently do nations achieve such rapid consensus on any global matter? It is as if a door was briefly opened, something was glimpsed, and then the door was decisively sealed shut. In that fleeting moment, the legacy of the Piri Reis map resurfaces. A drawing from the 1500s, potentially based on maps from millennia prior, finds an echo in the movements of warships and satellites. The same coastline, the same profound curiosity, yet now with higher stakes, a denser silence, and classified maps. Thus, we return to Byrd, to his warning, to the edge of the ice where his aircraft turned back. Whatever he observed, whatever compelled his men to retreat from Antarctica's shadow, it left no discernible trace in the public record. Yet, a lingering sense of unease persists. And perhaps, if one listens acutely enough, beneath the static of declassified reports and the crunch of boots on ice, one can still discern the echo of ancient footsteps guided by forgotten maps, drawn long before our conventional historical narrative began. They were never intended to be explorers. When the Knights Templar first emerged in the early 12th century, their ostensible mission was to safeguard Christian pilgrims journeying along the route to Jerusalem. They were perceived as simple men, armed with swords and bound by vows, or so the prevailing narrative suggests. However, certain aspects of their ascendancy, its suddenness, its immense scope, and its shroud of secrecy, imply that their true mission was far more ambitious. Perhaps they were not merely defending routes. Perhaps they were acquiring something predating the Crusades, something concealed beneath the sacred soil of the Holy Land. It is documented that they conducted excavations beneath the Temple Mount. Officially, this was to establish their headquarters within the Al-Aqsa Mosque. However, the extent of their undertaking exceeded mere residential requirements. They dug tunnels, cleared ancient chambers, and recovered various objects. Upon their emergence, they were fundamentally transformed from a disparate band of knights into Europe's most potent and unassailable order, endowed with papal protection, extensive banking networks, and considerable, though whispered, influence across kingdoms. The timeline of their rise does not appear coincidental. It suggests an ignition point. Some scholars posit that they discovered documents, scrolls, or tablets containing forgotten scientific knowledge, sacred geometry, or ancient maps. These items, if they existed, would have contained insights unseen since the zenith of Alexandria. And if they included fragments of cartography, perhaps detailing lands far beyond Europe, they would have been invaluable not necessarily for conquest, but for control. A control not exerted through military might, but through information capable of shifting empires. The knights were not solely warriors. They were also engineers. They built with remarkable precision. Their commanderies were often aligned with celestial markers, and their symbols resonate in cathedrals, in the labyrinthine tracings of rose windows, and in ancient stone circles. What they comprehended, they encoded. What they could not yet utilize, they meticulously preserved. This is where the historical trail begins to shimmer with an unusual light. By the time the Templars were suppressed in 1307, their extensive archives had reportedly vanished. Philip IV of France anticipated seizing vast quantities of gold and relics, but instead, he found only empty vaults. Some argue that their true treasure was never physical, but rather stored in coded manuscripts and sealed cylinders, documents transported across the sea to Scotland, to Portugal, and to other unknown destinations. Here, the narrative begins to drift geographically southward. Following the suppression, many surviving Templars sought refuge in Portugal, where King Dinis shrewdly declined to persecute them. Instead, he simply rebranded them as the Order of Christ. The same organizational structure, the same hierarchy, merely a new designation. Thus, the knowledge endured. Quietly, the Order of Christ commenced funding exploration. Notably, they trained Prince Henry the Navigator, one of the primary architects of Portugal's golden age of discovery. The distinct red cross of the Templars reappeared, this time emblazoned not on shields, but on the sails of ships. The voyages they sponsored were not random. They systematically ventured down the west coast of Africa, consistently pushing farther south, meticulously charting winds, islands, and coastlines. If they possessed older maps, forgotten hints of distant lands, their expeditions might have been a deliberate pursuit of confirmation, aligning ancient fragments with contemporary oceanic reality, a historical scavenger hunt written in the stars and salt. Now, consider a small, weathered manuscript discovered in the 19th century within a Portuguese monastery. It contains what appears to be a rudimentary polar projection. Scholars initially dismissed it as symbolic, perhaps alchemical. However, modern overlays reveal a curious resemblance to the Antarctic continent, again depicted without its ice. The ink is faded, the lines imperfect, but if one adjusts for distortion and curvature, something uncanny emerges, too flawed to be a forgery, yet too accurate to be attributed to mere chance. Perhaps it was merely a draft, a copy of a copy, a faint echo of an earlier chart preserved by monks who did not fully comprehend its significance. At this point, the trail becomes increasingly challenging to follow. The Order of Christ gradually diminished in public influence, but fragments of its legacy persisted in Portugal's archives, in Vatican vaults, and curiously, among the possessions of certain noble families whose lineage traced back to Templar origins. These families maintained unusual libraries, funded obscure expeditions, and kept sea journals filled with unfamiliar symbols. One such journal, found in a private collection in Malta, describes a land of eternal silence beyond the winds, where mountains rise from the ocean floor and the stars shift unnaturally above. While this could be dismissed as poetic fancy, the coordinates listed fall just short of the Antarctic Circle. The date, 1472. Pause and reflect. That is 2 decades before Columbus embarked on his westward voyage, and 5 decades before the existence of Antarctica was even theorized. Yet, here is a journal describing a land beneath the southern sky, with references to compasses behaving erratically and stars moving like birds in fog. Strange indeed, but also remarkably consistent with modern accounts from polar expeditions, where magnetic anomalies and auroral disruptions frequently interfere with navigation. Could this be mere coincidence? Is it plausible that sufficient scraps and whispers survived to guide these individuals, Templars in all but name, towards something partially remembered and icebound? Perhaps the Templars were not attempting to conquer Antarctica. Perhaps they were merely striving to remember it, and if so, what vital knowledge had they lost? For memory is fragile, preserved in ink, on parchment, and in hushed prayers beneath ancient stone arches. Somewhere along the path, from Jerusalem to Lisbon, from Cairo to Malta, a map may have passed through countless hands, not as a blueprint for invasion, but as a relic, a poignant reminder of a world that existed before the pervasive snow. Their accuracy should not be possible. This is what renders them so profoundly unsettling. The Portolan charts, those crisp, compass-laced sea maps of the medieval world, emerged suddenly in the 13th century, lacking any clear origin, apparent evolutionary path, or technical explanation for their remarkable precision. Their coastlines conform to geographical reality with uncanny fidelity, devoid of whimsical monsters or decorative flourishes, displaying only rigorous geometry, grid lines, and unwavering accuracy. For an era when much of the world still entertained notions of dragons at the edges of the ocean, Portolan charts appear anachronistic. The oldest surviving example, the Carta Pisana, dates to approximately 1275. It depicts the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and portions of the Atlantic with a level of detail and veracity that would not be surpassed for centuries. Crucially, it appears fully formed, no prototypes, no cruder preliminary versions, just a sudden clarity, as if a light had been abruptly illuminated in the prevailing cartographic darkness. Historians have long endeavored to account for this anomaly. Some propose that sailors progressively refined their maps over generations, utilizing dead reckoning and coastal observations. Others suggest that knowledge migrated westward from Arab or Byzantine sources. However, these theories often unravel under close scrutiny. Dead reckoning alone cannot yield such consistent, straight-line accuracy, and no equivalent charts of comparable precision exist in the supposed source cultures, at least none that have been discovered. Consequently, the fundamental question persists: from whence did this extraordinary knowledge originate? One theory, largely unpopular among mainstream scholars but increasingly difficult to disregard, posits that Portolan charts are not medieval innovations, but rather reproductions, copies of far older charts preserved in secrecy, perhaps transmitted through monastic orders, merchant guilds, or even more ancient lineages. The Templars, for instance. By the 13th century, the Templars had established an extensive network of commanderies across Europe and the Mediterranean. They possessed fleets, ports, and their own proprietary systems of knowledge. If any group had access to ancient navigational data, whether from the Library of Alexandria, hidden Jewish scrolls, or Islamic scholars in Jerusalem, it would have been they, and their geographic reach extended precisely into the regions most perfectly delineated by the early Portolans. Even more curiously, the orientation of Portolan maps often differs from modern north-up projections. Many early Portolans are rotated. East is not consistently situated where one might expect. Compass roses are liberally scattered across the surface, radiating lines in starburst patterns that resemble not artistic caprice but something inherently functional, a grid, possibly based on magnetic anomalies or an ancient coordinate system long since abandoned. In fact, some researchers have noted a subtle correlation between Portolan lines and geomagnetic nodal points, slight irregularities in the Earth's magnetic field. How could medieval mapmakers have possessed this awareness? They lacked the instrumentation to detect geomagnetic variation. Yet these lines intersect with uncanny alignment in certain key regions. This suggests that whoever created the originals, if such originals existed, did so with observational capabilities lost to time. Here, one must recall an earlier significant detail from this journey: the subglacial alignment of the Piri Reis map, the way its coastlines, invisible for thousands of years, match those revealed by modern radar. The same eerie precision threads through Portolan charts. It is as if both artifacts share a common cartographic DNA, providing glimpses of a forgotten worldview where the Earth was not merely mapped but meticulously measured. And here lies the subtle but chilling connection. Both the Piri Reis map and the earliest Portolans emerged during or immediately after the zenith of Templar influence. Both are maritime tools. Both rely on source materials that are no longer traceable, and both appear to reflect knowledge considerably beyond their historical period. Some Portolans even depict islands that do not exist, or rather, no longer exist, submerged volcanic landmasses, shoals that have since eroded, possible remnants of an ancient seascape remembered not through myth but through precise measurement. These phantom islands are often dismissed as mere sailors' tales. But what if they were once real? What if they were charted during a warmer epoch, preserved by scribes who did not fully comprehend what they were copying? A quiet, persistent rumor suggests that one such chart, currently held in a private collection in Genoa, depicts a southern arc below the African coast, unlabeled, unnamed, merely a faint curved line at the bottom of the vellum. When juxtaposed with modern projections, it aligns remarkably with the Antarctic Peninsula, an impossible feature for a 14th century document. Its owner, a reclusive aristocrat with purported ties to several Catholic orders, has consistently refused to permit its public study. The chart is rarely exhibited, yet those who claim to have seen it describe the ink faintly glowing under certain conditions, perhaps due to metallic content, or perhaps due to the profound secrets it still contains. If such a map truly exists, then the question is no longer whether knowledge survived, but how it did so. Who meticulously kept these maps alive when the wider world forgot them? Who concealed them in scroll tubes and castle vaults? Who ensured that their lines remained sharp while the empires that gave them birth crumbled into dust? One plausible answer lies with the Order of Christ, Portugal's post-Templar brotherhood. Their navigators would have cherished these charts, utilized them, preserved them, and perhaps transmitted them to those who later informed Piri Reis. Thus, we trace the mystery backward, through layers of reproduction and silence, from Ottoman ports to Templar strongholds, from sea captains to scribes, from the known world's edge to the Earth's southern pole. Each time, the same pattern emerges: clarity where confusion should prevail, and precision where myth should dominate. No one definitively knows who drew the first portolan, but someone did. And they perceive something that we are only now beginning to rediscover, hidden beneath centuries of ice and ink. The sea mist curls around the ancient stones of Tomar, like a whispered vow. It is quiet there now, with only the rustle of leaves and the distant toll of bells. Yet, in the 14th century, this fortress vibrated with renewed purpose. The Knights Templar, persecuted and fragmented across Europe, found sanctuary here, not in secrecy, but with royal sanction. King Dinis of Portugal, shrewd and calculating, refused to turn his sword against the order. Instead, he strategically rebranded them as the Order of Christ, the same knights, the same underlying mission, merely a new designation. It was a masterful stroke of survival. While in France, the Templars endured torture and erasure. In Portugal, they re-emerged as custodians of faith, science, and navigation. This pivotal transformation, from holy warriors to maritime patrons, was not accidental. It positioned Portugal, a relatively small kingdom situated at the periphery of the known world, to become the unexpected epicenter of global exploration. By the early 15th century, the Order of Christ had ascended to become one of the most influential institutions in the country. Its Grand Master was none other than Prince Henry the Navigator, a figure whose ambitions extended far beyond the Iberian Peninsula. Under his guidance, caravels were constructed, captains were rigorously trained, and expeditions embarked not northward or eastward, but consistently southward. Historians typically characterize this era as the dawn of Portugal's Golden Age. However, viewed through the lens of our current investigation, it acquires a different resonance. What if these voyages were not solely motivated by the pursuit of new trade routes or unexplored territories? What if they were driven by a desire for validation, the confirmation of something already suspected, perhaps even something already known? Certain peculiarities are evident. The Order's ships bore the red cross of the Templars, serving not merely as a symbol of Christianity, but as a potent legacy. Their vessels were equipped with astrolabes and maps significantly more advanced than the prevailing standards of the time, and their movements conveyed a peculiar confidence, as if they were pursuing known entities rather than merely navigating by guesswork. One often overlooked figure from this period is João de Castro, a Portuguese navigator and cartographer who sailed with an uncanny awareness of magnetic variation. His logs include entries detailing compass drift, an unexplained directional pull centuries before the concept of magnetic declination was formally understood. In one of his journals, he notes an invisible river of force subtly affecting their instruments near the southern Atlantic. What could he have been referring to? Intriguingly, this phenomenon aligns with what modern researchers term the South Atlantic anomaly, a distortion in Earth's magnetic field that disrupts instruments and satellites. How did a 16th century navigator perceive what today requires orbital equipment to detect? Perhaps he did not fully comprehend the anomaly itself, but rather knew that someone, somewhere, had already documented it, preserved it, and passed it down. The Order of Christ, much like their Templar predecessors, maintained private records. Not all of these documents have been released to historians. Some, by their own admission, remain within ecclesiastical archives, sealed not by the passage of time, but by deliberate intent. Even among the released documents, discernible gaps exist, voyages unaccounted for, ships listed as on mission without explanation of purpose or route, and crew rosters appearing for expeditions that were never officially declared. One vessel, the Santa Maria, is recorded as departing from Lagos in 1411. No destination is listed, no return documented, only a marginal note, authorized by OC High Secrecy. OC stands for Ordem de Cristo, the Order of Christ. These were not routine merchant voyages or military crusades. They represented something distinct, covert, intentional, and undocumented. Some historians have sought to explain these expeditions as unsuccessful colonization attempts along the African coast. Others believe the ships were simply lost at sea. However, a few Portuguese archivists, meticulously working in obscure corners of monastic libraries, have advanced a far more provocative hypothesis, that these voyages were seeking something already known, something alluded to in old Templar texts, something previously observed and awaiting rediscovery. A surviving letter from 1433, penned by a knight brother of the order, mentions the chart from the vault and states that the winds beyond the equator bend toward the promised white. No scholar has successfully elucidated the precise meaning of this phrase. Some suggest poetic metaphor, others discern a colder, more glacial undertone. During this same period, a discernible pattern emerges in the construction of Portuguese way stations. They were built farther south than ostensibly required. Supplies were stockpiled in quantities suggestive of larger, unlisted fleets, and certain navigators received pensions far exceeding their official rank, rewarded not for military campaigns but for maintained silence. The most compelling piece of this puzzle may be the Livro de Marinharia, or Seamanship Book, compiled under royal commission in the 1480 seconds. Though extensively edited, it contains one anomalous diagram, a circular projection marked with a curved southern landmass. It is unlabeled, its coordinates vague, and its coastline echoes the distinct shape found on the Bosch and Piri Reis maps. This page was almost excised, barely salvaged by its binding, and in the corner, a single handwritten note reads, "Derived from the older chart, not to be replicated." Which older chart? Some have speculated that the Order of Christ inherited more than just ships and titles from the Templars. They may have inherited a copy of an Alexandrian map, one transmitted through Arabic scholars, translated in secrecy, and meticulously guarded across generations. If so, then their silent expeditions were not mere explorations. They were verifications, missions to confirm existing knowledge. Intriguingly, there is a growing consensus that the Portuguese may have reached the southern Atlantic long before official records indicate. An island, Ilha de Santa Maria, appears on several 15th century maps, situated near the Antarctic convergence, later dismissed as myth. Its position lies suspiciously close to modern iceberg fields, regions where ancient rock occasionally breaches the surface before being resubmerged by the ocean. One fragmented 1491 document lists a voyage to lands past the mists, where the sea calms and the stars wheel backward. No other reference to this specific voyage survives, but the stars spinning in reverse is a phenomenon that occurs only when crossing into the deep southern hemisphere. And then there is the silence. After 1492, these anomalous voyages cease to appear. The Order of Christ shifts its focus. Columbus sails westward, and the age of discovery rapidly expands into global empire. However, the earlier, quieter missions are effectively erased. No mention in textbooks, no commemorative statues, only gaps in the historical record. Why? Some believe they discovered nothing of consequence. Others contend that they discovered something significant and deliberately chose to conceal it. A Portuguese sea chest, unearthed in a private estate in the Azores, contained a set of unusual instruments, early astrolabes, compass variations, and one peculiar item resembling a quadrant inscribed with glyphs not found in any modern maritime catalog. Alongside it, a sheath of faded papers, too damaged to be fully deciphered, yet one phrase remains legible. "We saw the line of white land. It was not cloud." That line may have constituted the first visual contact with the Antarctic coastline, but if they observed it, why did they not return? Why did they not claim it? Why allow it to vanish once more beneath the ice? Perhaps because the objective was never colonization. Perhaps it was confirmation, a subtle acknowledgement from history's margins that what had been remembered was true. And perhaps, with the knowledge thus secured, they proceeded as the Templars had always done with dangerous truths. They locked it away. They never explicitly referred to themselves as Templars. However, when the earliest Freemasons began to convene in clandestine lodges across Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries, echoes of the old order permeated their activities. In their symbols, their oaths, their architectural designs, in their profound reverence for knowledge, their preoccupation with geometry, and the whispered conviction that certain truths were not intended for widespread dissemination. If the Templars were physically eradicated, the Freemasons may have preserved their essence and perhaps, more intriguingly, their institutional memory. Historians continue to debate the precise nature of this connection. Officially, Freemasonry is described as having evolved from medieval stoneworkers' guilds, not from Crusader legacies. Yet, upon deeper examination, the distinctions begin to blur. Many of the earliest Masonic rites reference the Temple of Solomon, precisely as the Templars did, having derived their name from its ruins. Numerous lodges feature checkerboard floors, symbolizing duality, much like the black and white banners once flown by Templar knights. Then there is the peculiar preoccupation with maps. Not all maps delineate terrain. Some illustrate patterns, star alignments, ley lines, or imaginary geometries that superimpose upon the earth, like a forgotten grid. Early Masonic documents are replete with such imagery: globes, compasses, plumb lines, all ostensibly innocent symbols of construction and craftsmanship. However, within their layered meanings lies a deeper impulse: orientation, a desire to situate oneself not merely in physical space, but within a secret lineage. Moreover, certain high-level Masonic degrees refer to the lost word, a fragment of divine truth purportedly recovered from ancient ruins and transmitted in code. Some scholars believe this word is metaphorical, representing knowledge salvaged from the past and deliberately veiled for protection. Others argue that it was quite literal, a name, a place, or perhaps even a specific coordinate. The Masonic fascination with the southern cardinal direction is subtle but persistent. Early lodge texts instruct initiates to gaze to the east and guard the south. Floor plans of Masonic temples frequently exhibit an orientation towards southern points. One rare Scottish Rite manuscript even includes a peculiar diagram: 3 intersecting triangles above a circular landmass, labeled only with the cryptic Latin phrase glacius ultima, final ice. This is not merely symbolic. In the 19th century, several prominent Freemasons financially supported exploratory voyages, including expeditions to Patagonia and the South Shetland Islands. On multiple occasions, these voyages were accompanied by cartographers carrying star charts that included references to an invisible continent, a phrase reiterated in several lodge archives, though never explicitly explained. A particularly compelling artifact is a parchment from a Parisian lodge dated 1774. It contains a prayer written in code, which, when decrypted, includes the phrase, "May the southern lands remain veiled until the wise are ready to remember." This document has been authenticated, its ink tested, yet its meaning has been largely overlooked, dismissed as esoteric poetry. However, the timing is curious. It was penned just 2 years before James Cook circumnavigated Antarctica without ever sighting land, despite asserting that he felt it was very near. Here is where the narrative becomes more unusual. The earliest known mention of Antarctica by name appears in a Masonic-aligned naturalist's work from 1820, predating the continent's official confirmation. The author, a member of a London lodge, described ice walls and southern secrets and referenced a geometry that hides beneath snow. His book was subsequently and discreetly removed from circulation. Only 3 copies are known to remain. One is held in a private Masonic collection in Edinburgh, another is sealed in the Vatican archives, and the third reportedly disappeared during the Blitz. Coincidence? Possibly. However, consider this. If the Templars did indeed preserve knowledge of Antarctica, fragments of pre-glacial maps, records of lost coasts, then this information would have required a new repository after their suppression. The Masons, with their inherent secrecy, structured organization, and philosophical framework, constituted ideal custodians. They were not necessarily compelled to act upon the information. They merely needed to protect it, ritualize it, and encode it into their architecture and oaths until, one day, someone might comprehend its significance. Freemasonry has consistently concerned itself with thresholds, the crossing of gates, and ascent through levels of initiation. Beneath this ascent lies a profound, buried narrative, that of a lost origin, a place from which knowledge emanated and to which it might eventually return. Antarctica, cold and forgotten, perfectly fulfills this role. Several 18th century Masonic temples, particularly in Portugal and southern France, exhibit curious anomalies: pillars oriented at unusual angles, bas-reliefs depicting boats without sails, and icebergs carved into obscure corners that typically escape notice. One temple in Lisbon features a mosaic of a knight with his foot positioned upon what appears to be a peculiar landmass with curling edges and icy peaks. Art historians interpret this as allegory, but perhaps it is, in fact, a map. The caption beneath it reads, "Fiat lux sub glacies," let there be light beneath the ice. And then there is the historical fact that numerous such lodges were destroyed by fire. The Lisbon earthquake of 1755 devastated much of the city, including one of the oldest known Masonic archives. During the French Revolution, dozens of lodges were sacked. In the ensuing chaos, centuries of ritual notes, sketches, and coded scrolls vanished. However, not all was lost. A private collection in Malta, inherited by a descendant of Templar sympathizers, includes one final clue: a drawing of a circular landmass surrounded by cryptic symbols. It bears no names, no compass, yet its contours align with the Antarctic coastline with alarming precision. In the margin, a single word, scribbled in faded ink. The Masons never claimed to be explorers, but perhaps they were guardians, not of lands, but of memory. And if that proposition holds true, then somewhere beneath lodges and cathedrals, behind bookshelves and beneath altars, fragments of the forgotten map still linger, not to be acted upon, but simply to be remembered. Until the ice thaws, until the silence breaks, until we are prepared to gaze southward and perceive what they once perceived. Fire and ice rarely converge in the same historical narrative. One element destroys, the other preserves. Yet, within the deepest cores of Antarctic ice, cylinders meticulously drilled from miles beneath the surface, each layer representing a frozen year of history, something unexpected has been discovered. Microscopic traces of soot, black carbon particles dispersed like ash across millennia. But what could ignite in a land where vegetation is non-existent, where the sun disappears for months, and where relentless winds scour everything clean? The initial samples originated from the Vostok ice core in East Antarctica, one of the deepest ever drilled. Scientists anticipated finding records of volcanic activity markers of global eruptions or drifting ash from distant mountains. However, the observed patterns did not correspond with known volcanic timelines. Some soot deposits were excessively localized, remarkably consistent, and, most intriguingly, too recent. One layer, dated to approximately 6,200 years ago, bore chemical markers indicative not of basaltic lava, but of biomass combustion. In simpler terms, something organic had burned. Skeptics propose long-range atmospheric transport, perhaps wildfires in South America or Africa, propelled their ash thousands of miles on high winds. While plausible, atmospheric modeling struggles to account for the intensity and purity of certain deposits, particularly those clustered within deep, narrow strata. It is as if the fires burned nearby, closer than any accepted human activity in Antarctica would permit, which provokes a challenging question. Did a human presence once exist there? If portions of Antarctica were ice-free during the mid-Holocene climatic optimum, as accumulating geological evidence increasingly suggests, then such a scenario is not inconceivable. Coastal valleys warmed by oceanic currents, receding ice shelves, and inland lakes remaining unfrozen year-round could have created intermittent windows, spanning centuries, during which life could not only survive, but potentially flourish. This leads to one of the most controversial findings in Antarctic science: Lake Vostok. Hidden beneath 2 miles of ice, this vast subglacial lake was believed to have remained sealed for over 15 million years. However, when Russian scientists successfully drilled into it in the early 2010 seconds, they encountered perplexing anomalies, unidentified microbes, indications of thermophilic life, and traces of organic material that seemed anachronistic. One researcher reportedly characterized it as a biological signature out of place in time. The comprehensive results were never publicly released. The team was recalled, and the drill site was sealed. However, whispers persisted that the lake's sediment exhibited signs of recent disturbance, that a sonar ping had registered something other than rock, that artificial structures beneath the ice would be indistinguishable from natural formations, unless one knew precisely what to seek. While these whispers eventually subsided, another emerged from an entirely different direction. In 2015, a NASA satellite detected faint thermal signatures near Princess Elizabeth Land, not far from Vostok. These were small, concentrated heat blooms. Again, volcanic activity was initially proposed, but no active vents exist in that area. The explanation then shifted to geothermal hotspots, but no one could explain why the heat pattern resembled a grid. This grid appears in no public records, only in a leaked satellite overlay briefly published on a peripheral website before being subsequently removed. The image, blurry and barely legible, was conspicuously labeled with a curious string of letters. C. 9 AE Templum, Latin for temple. Was it a hoax, a data glitch, or something deliberately permitted to bypass filters. What is definitively known is that heat alone does not produce soot, fire does. Combustion, whether indicative of human activity or something remarkably similar, cooking fires, signal beacons, ritual flames represents the kind of evidence left behind by occupation. Now, let us recall the Templar manuscript in the monastery of Tomar, purportedly depicting a continent of two rings where the breath of the earth rises in frozen steam. That phrase consistently perplexed researchers until thermal maps of Antarctica began to reveal circular formations around buried volcanic domes, geothermal rings that vent moisture in patterns eerily similar to the manuscript's design. Could this be mere coincidence? Or are we observing a memory that has been preserved and disguised as allegory? Furthermore, consider the peculiar references found in 18th century Jesuit letters. Mentions of the place of warmth beneath frost and columns blackened by old flame. Most scholars dismiss these as metaphorical expression. However, in context with ancient soot layers, heat anomalies, and missing geological data, they begin to read like field notes, observations, or perhaps even warnings. If ancient humans or an unknown culture once occupied parts of Antarctica, even for a brief period, it fundamentally alters our understanding. The soot becomes a definitive signature, a scar in the ice that declares, "We were here." It also provides a compelling explanation for the subsequent silence. No nation desires to be the first to declare that pre-Ice Age civilizations might have mapped, explored, or even inhabited Antarctica. The implications would ripple outward, challenging established timelines, necessitating a rewriting of human history, and unsettling both religious and academic orthodoxy. It is deemed safer to disregard the soot, to label it as distant ash, and to drill slightly shallower next time. Yet, the ice retains its memories every year, every burn, every breath. And if the Templars, or those who followed in their footsteps, acquired knowledge of ancient Antarctic settlements, whether through maps, scrolls, or oral tradition, they would have meticulously guarded it. Perhaps they were aware of the soot layers long before modern science. Perhaps they perceived fire beneath the frost as a sign not of destruction, but of enduring presence, a handprint left in the snow, a lantern flickering before the protracted darkness. And just possibly, that lantern was never entirely extinguished. Perhaps it still waits, buried, for someone to decipher the ash as a script, to perceive not merely data, but a profound narrative. For even ice can burn, if one remembers with sufficient intensity. The compass, in Antarctica, becomes a deceptive instrument. That unassuming needle, typically so reliable in more temperate latitudes, begins to oscillate near the pole, influenced by unseen forces, drawn by imperceptible currents beneath the ice. For centuries, navigators have observed this peculiarity. Instruments unexpectedly twitching, bearings inexplicably shifting, aircraft deviating from course only to self-correct miles later. The conventional explanation is straightforward enough. Earth's magnetic field exhibits chaotic behavior near the poles. However, some of these disturbances do not conform to known patterns. They are excessively localized, intensely focused, and appear almost deliberate. One such anomaly is situated in East Antarctica, beneath the Wilkes Land region. It first garnered attention in 2006 when NASA satellites, measuring gravity anomalies, detected a colossal depression nearly 300 miles wide and over 500 miles deep beneath the ice. Yet, it was not merely its immense size that provoked alarm. It was the feature at its center, a magnetic signal so intense, so concentrated, that it defied natural explanation. The readings suggested a dense object, deeply embedded within the Earth's crust, a metallic mass, possibly the remnant of a colossal asteroid impact. This remains the prevailing mainstream theory. However, even this hypothesis raises unsettling questions. There is no corresponding impact crater, no discernible ejecta fields, only a dome-shaped bulge situated beneath miles of compacted snow. A few geophysicists, speaking more in whispers than in formal publications, proposed a bolder idea. The anomaly might not be natural at all. Its symmetry, its sharply defined boundaries, its consistent presence over decades of readings, they began referring to it, only half-jokingly, as the hidden dome. Once one encounters this designation, it becomes difficult to disregard, for the concept of a dome beneath the ice resonates far beyond scientific discourse. In esoteric traditions, Domes frequently symbolize sacred knowledge, vaults, chambers, places constructed not by erosion, but by deliberate intent. Throughout history, temples have been domed structures, crypts have featured curved ceilings, and celestial spheres have been charted as domes overlaying flat maps. The architectural motif recurs persistently, round, sealed, containing something too potent to be exposed. What if this Antarctic dome represents precisely such a structure? Now, let us consider the Templars, for naturally, they would be involved. Among the less documented Templar artifacts catalogued in Lisbon prior to the order's suppression is a curious object, a polished obsidian disc meticulously etched with concentric circles and a series of triangular glyphs. The central circle is labeled Axis Mundi, a Latin term denoting the world's spiritual center. Curving across the disc's lower edge is a crescent-shaped landmass marked Terminus Glaciae, edge of the ice. Researchers dismissed it as merely symbolic. However, when the outermost ring was superimposed onto modern satellite maps, it loosely corresponded to the circumference of the Wilkes Land anomaly, a 13th century object resonating with a 21st century discovery. Coincidence or inherited knowledge? Some scholars believe the Templars acquired ancient knowledge during their excavations in Jerusalem, fragments of pre-Christian cosmology, possibly Babylonian or Sumerian in origin. These teachings reportedly spoke of a southern gate, a place where the Earth's breath was different, where the boundaries between the celestial and the terrestrial were permeable. Later, Masonic documents refer to this as the Polar Vault, a term appearing in only one known ritual, classified within the highest degree rites of Scottish Freemasonry. Its initiation, rarely performed, references a light hidden in ice, guarded by the silence of the dome. This is a poetic phrase, unless it is not. Satellite thermal scans of the Wilkes Land anomaly reveal periodic bursts of heat, almost rhythmic, as if something deep within is alive, breathing, pulsing. Not in a biological sense, perhaps, but geothermally, technologically, artificially. NASA refrains from comment. The European Space Agency offers only vague confirmations. Every attempt to dispatch surface expeditions near the region has been delayed or rerouted. One Australian research team in 2011 reported navigational inconsistencies and inexplicable equipment malfunctions as they approached the anomaly zone. They were subsequently recalled for safety reasons. No official follow-up was permitted, but the lore has already permeated wider circles. In 2017, a whistleblower from an international geological survey claimed to have seen seismic scans of the area. She described a dome-shaped void beneath the ice, structured, she asserted, layered like a ziggurat turned upside down. Her claims were dismissed, her credentials revoked, and her name expunged from the publication registry. Yet, the signal persists. And then there is the geometry. Patterns observed within the anomaly suggest intentionality. 90-degree angles, concentric curves, density gradients resembling chambers. One scan, briefly leaked online and swiftly removed, bore the file name Templum, Origin, JPG. Was it authentic? Impossible to confirm. But again, the word templum, the Latin root of temple, a term with distinct Templar resonance, appears. If what lies beneath Wilkes Land is artificial, ancient, buried, and actively emitting signals, it would logically explain the prevailing silence, the aborted expeditions, and the sudden global interest in Antarctic treaties. One does not safeguard barren ice with international cooperation unless something of immense value is concealed beneath it. And perhaps that is why the Templars transmitted the disc, the rituals, the encrypted maps, not as a guide to conquest, but as a marker, a warning, a whisper across time. Here lies the forgotten dome. Not everyone accepts this, most dismiss it. However, silence is not synonymous with absence. In a land where compasses spin erratically, where ice conceals and echoes distort, the absence of overt noise might be the most profound signal of all. For if something is hidden, and everyone concurs not to seek it, that is not science, that is deliberate secrecy. In the late 18th century, as European empires expanded across oceans and into continents, another frontier was rumored colder, harsher, and more elusive. Antarctica had not yet been formally discovered in any official sense. Yet, scattered across naval logs, private letters, and archived journals, hints persist of voyages that ventured farther south than history currently acknowledges. These accounts do not appear in textbooks. Most are not even indexed in mainstream maritime databases, yet they exist. fragments of memory nearly obliterated. Consider the case of Captain James Cook. In 1773, he crossed the Antarctic Circle, becoming the first recorded individual to do so. However, after circumnavigating the southern waters, he declared, "No habitable land could possibly exist amid such desolation. The world will derive no benefit from it." He thus dismissed any further interest. Yet, what Cook deliberately omitted from his public logs is even more intriguing. According to the private journal of a midshipman aboard HMS Resolution, the expedition encountered an ice cliff smooth as carved marble, behind which strange formations rose, too symmetrical to be nature's accident. That entry was never officially published. The journal itself subsequently vanished from the Admiralty archives in 1882. Then there is the largely forgotten voyage of Jean-Baptiste Charles Bouvet de Lozier. In 1739, he reported sighting land, dark rock, snow-covered, peeking through the mist. He named it Cape Circumcision. For decades, no one could rediscover it. It seemed to vanish. Today, Bouvet Island exists, but it is hundreds of miles from where he claimed landfall. So, what did he observe? Was it a mirage, or was the original location intentionally suppressed? A curious pattern begins to emerge. Reports of land sightings south of the known map, consistently vague, frequently dismissed, and typically expunged from subsequent records. In one instance, a Swedish expedition in 1784 noted columns of steam rising from fissures in the ice, alongside stones carved with angular markings. This report was buried within a shipping manifest. It took a doctoral student centuries later, meticulously examining customs documents in Gothenburg, to even uncover the description. Why were these narratives erased? One theory is pragmatic. The southern continent was considered strategically worthless, harsh, inhospitable, and not meriting documentation. However, another theory suggests a more ominous reason. Perhaps these expeditions discovered something too sensitive to be disclosed. At this juncture, the Jesuits enter the narrative. In 1767, the Society of Jesus was forcibly suppressed across much of Europe. Their libraries were confiscated, and their missions shuttered. Yet, during the process of inventorying Jesuit holdings in France, Portugal, and Spain, a number of unlisted artifacts and documents quietly disappeared. Among them, a parchment fragment referencing Terra Australis Incognita and Templarim Navigatio, Templar navigation. The connection remains ambiguous but persistent. Jesuits were known for archiving vast quantities of knowledge maps, botanical drawings, cosmological charts, and for encrypting sensitive information with layered allegory. Thus, if the Templars had transmitted anything, the Jesuits may have inherited it. A diary from a French abbey, dated 1775, describes a heated debate in a Lisbon seminary over a sealed folio that referenced a journey toward the base of the Axis. One priest reportedly referred to it as a road to forbidden knowledge. The folio, the abbot noted, bore Templar insignia on its binding. In the British Museum's private archives, a document catalogued only as Shelburne Fragment, Number 9 exhibits a map sketched in faded ink crude, irregular, yet unmistakably Antarctic in shape. Along the top margin, in nearly illegible Latin, is inscribed, "Regnum sub glacies expectant, the kingdom beneath the ice awaits." The document is undated, unattributed, and maintained in restricted storage. Yet, similar phrases reappear in letters from Portuguese explorers, in notes from Dutch cartographers, and in journals belonging to Spanish navigators, whose names have largely faded into obscurity. All these instances collectively suggest that in the 1700s, more than one vessel may have glimpsed the White Continent, and that what they observed was not merely snow and rock, but something structured. And, remarkably, that is when the silence begins. After the 1,780 seconds, reports of southern exploration virtually cease until the 19th century, when official discovery recommences. During those intervening decades, a vacuum exists, as if the compass needles themselves were collectively instructed to forget the route. Naturally, skeptics assert that these are merely maritime legends, tales spun in the darkness to entertain weary crews. However, the consistency of certain details, reiterated across diverse languages and decades, compels one to pause. The recurring mentions of angular hills, hollow thuds beneath the ice, and crystalline towers rising from fog are too peculiar to have been independently invented in the same manner by so many disparate individuals. Then there is the 1791 expedition of Captain Brumley, an English trader bound for South Africa. His ship logs, recovered from an estate sale in 1924, contain a single, disquieting line: "We passed into a bay not charted." The sun did not rise for 3 days. The ice was warm to the touch. Warm ice, an absence of sunlight, a bay that no one else had mapped. These are not the types of observations found in standard classroom textbooks. They belong to a different repository of knowledge, one behind locked doors, devoid of ISBN numbers or helpful guides. Thus, one must consider, what if the 1700s were not a period of ignorance regarding Antarctica, but rather a time of deliberate suppression? What if someone ventured too close? And what if the Templars, through their legacy in Portugal, the Jesuits, and secret cartographic traditions, had already delineated the path? In that scenario, the erasure would not have been accidental. It would have been meticulously intentional. Long before Antarctica acquired its name or its precise location on modern maps, ancient civilizations speculated about a vast landmass at the southern extremity of the world. This was not merely a geographical concept. It was imbued with symbolic, spiritual, and metaphysical significance. This southernmost point was, for some, regarded as the axis mundi, the mythic center around which the world revolves. In esoteric traditions that persisted long beyond antiquity, whispers endured of a temple situated at this pole, hidden, buried, yet central to a forgotten cosmology. While this may appear absurd to a modern sensibility, several interwoven strands of lore suggest that the Templars may have shared this belief. The concept of the axis mundi manifests across diverse traditions. In Norse cosmology, it is Yggdrasil, the world tree. In Hindu belief, Mount Meru. In Mesoamerican myth, a central mountain or pyramid connecting the heavens and the underworld. The Greeks spoke of a celestial axis extending from the north to the South Pole. Here, however, the narrative becomes peculiar. While many cultures oriented their sacred geography toward the north, certain mystical branches, particularly among Pythagoreans and later Gnostic sects, referred to the hidden south as the true source of divine fire, a place of origin or exile. Early Christian mystics adapted these ideas, frequently allegorizing them. However, the Templars, always displaying a suspiciously Gnostic affinity, may have interpreted such concepts more literally. Some of their rituals reportedly involved symbolic journeys to the pole, not in a literal geographical sense, but as a passage toward profound, concealed knowledge. Diagrams recovered from 14th century ruins in Languedoc depict concentric circles encompassing a central temple, labeled Templum sub glacium, the temple beneath the ice, in one variant. Historians generally dismiss these as poetic or cosmological imagery, yet the phrasing resonates across unexpected contexts. In a 1492 manuscript discovered in a Portuguese monastery, a marginal note describes a land not shown on maps, whiter than parchment, where stands the throne of the world. This manuscript had been owned by an abbot known for his keen interest in Templar relics. However, perhaps the most striking connection emanates from Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. Frequently associated with Templar mythology, the chapel contains a series of carvings that have perplexed scholars for centuries. One panel, largely unnoticed until recent years, appears to depict a domed structure surrounded by serpentine shapes. Snowflake symbols border the image. One researcher proposed that the iconography matches no known region except for the terrain near the South Pole, as viewed from above. This observation was made centuries before that region was discovered. If accurate, this would imply a symbolic, if not literal, awareness. The red cross worn by Templar knights was not merely an emblem of faith, it also represented the 4 cardinal directions, signifying the union of spirit and earth. In certain interpretations, the intersection of these lines points to a central convergence. Some esoteric texts even equate this with the pole, the precise point where heaven and earth momentarily connect. Now, juxtapose that idea with a landmass sealed beneath miles of ice, and the myth gains profound meaning. There is also the intriguing matter of the so-called Templar compass. Discovered in a sealed reliquary in Portugal, this ornate device was inscribed not with traditional degrees, but with symbols corresponding to astrological houses and 4 glyphs at cardinal points. The southern glyph was conspicuously distinct, etched with what appeared to be a spiral leading downward. Beneath it, in cramped Latin, Via occulta ad templum mundi, the hidden way to the temple of the world. This same phrasing appears, albeit distorted and translated, but still recognizable, in a 17th century Freemasonic manuscript preserved in Prague. There, it is rendered as the buried axis leads to the master's throne, where ice becomes fire and silence speaks. The metaphor may seem elaborate, but the alignment is uncanny, particularly given the early Freemasons' deep preoccupation with Templar continuity. If we adopt a broader perspective, a narrative slowly, even tentatively, begins to coalesce, that the Templars, through a synthesis of ancient sources, Gnostic beliefs, and first-hand discoveries in the Holy Land, came to believe in a terrestrial temple hidden far to the south. That this temple, whether physical or symbolic, represented an originating point for something, perhaps wisdom, perhaps power, and that their successors, through the Portuguese Order of Christ, the Jesuits, and even clandestine societies, endeavored to pursue this belief. One fragment of evidence appears almost too poetic to be authentic. In 1603, a Portuguese navigator named Estevão Martins penned a letter from Goa, India, addressed to a monk at the convent of Tomar. It reads, "The seas are restless, but the southern star has aligned. If the axis is true, then the house of the sword shall find its door among ice. Tell the brotherhood, the temple is not lost. It waits where no sound endures." And there it is again, House of the Sword, a clear allusion to the Templars. The temple is not lost, it waits. There is no direct proof, of course only echoes, whispers, discarded maps, symbolic inscriptions, ice cores, and an enveloping silence. However, as one traces these patterns, as one follows the clues from Crusader bastions, to weather-beaten chapels, to forgotten maritime logs, and to magnetic anomalies detected on satellite scans, something beneath the frost begins to stir. The Templars may not have merely protected knowledge, they may have actively pursued it southward, towards a temple at the axis. And if such a place was ever real, hidden, sacred, secret, what profound truths might still be sealed beneath the ice? One imagines sitting before a candle-lit desk in the 16th century, quill in hand, surrounded by charts copied from older maps, whispers transmitted through archives now lost to fire or conquest. One inks a coastline that curves too sharply for the known world. One hesitates. The shape is familiar, yet forbidden. It does not belong. And so, with a slow exhalation, one ceases. The edge of the map remains blank. That very blankness, that silence, is where our historical investigation now leads. In the years immediately following the creation of the Piri Reis map, a peculiar phenomenon began to unfold in European cartography. The audacious depictions of southern landmasses, so confidently delineated in the early 1500s, gradually started to disappear. By the late 16th century, most new maps no longer included the speculative outlines of Terra Australis. The southern continent, once a near certainty in both geographical theory and imaginative cartography, receded into obscurity. Even more remarkably, the maps that had once featured it were either sequestered, disregarded, or quietly removed from circulation. This was not because explorers had disproven the land's existence. Antarctica remained entirely unvisited for another 3 centuries. Instead, it appears the silence was a deliberate act. This historical fact is well established. Early modern European maps frequently reflected not only discoveries but also prevailing ideologies, what rulers desired the world to be. Cartographers relied on royal patronage. Their maps were not merely navigational tools but instruments of power. If something was depicted, it implied a claim had been laid. If something vanished, it signified a decision that its existence should not be publicly known. One obscure clue emanates from Gerardus Mercator, renowned for the map projection that bears his name. In a letter composed in 1577, he cryptically refers to southern lands whose truth I dare not inscribe. He had previously depicted the South Pole with considerable imaginative detail, based partly on older sources he claimed originated from the travels of Jacobus Knoyen. However, those sources are now lost, gone, and effectively discredited. An ongoing scholarly debate surrounds Mercator's mention of polar kingdoms and the possibility that he referenced secret archives, potentially from the Vatican or the Portuguese Order of Christ. Some researchers argue that a suppression campaign occurred during the Counter-Reformation, as Catholic powers feared esoteric geography, associating it with heresy or pre-Christian cosmology. Any map suggesting knowledge of unknown lands might have threatened the theological order. And one must recall the historical context of this period. The Reformation, the Inquisition, books burned, archives seized, and orders of knowledge systematically suppressed. If the Templar remnants had preserved any records of Antarctica, or had even transmitted fragmented allusions, this would have been the period during which those traces were deliberately buried. One interpretation increasingly emphasizes silent censorship not in a modern, heavy-handed sense, but as a form of strategic omission. Leave just enough to create confusion, just enough to entice, but never enough to provide definitive confirmation. The Jesuits, closely linked to both exploration and theology, assumed the role of new custodians of geographical knowledge in the post-Templar world. Many operated from Lisbon and Rome, where access to restricted texts, numerous of which were inherited from older orders, was rigorously controlled. Jesuit cartographers in the late 1500s had access to South American reports, Indian Ocean logs, and potentially even ancient documents recovered from the Middle East. Yet, their maps were meticulously conservative. No more speculative risk-taking, no more hints of southern lands, only verifiable information. The ensuing silence, naturally, invites modern conspiracy theories. Some propose that the maps were suppressed precisely because they were accurate, that certain individuals possessed knowledge of Antarctica before the official narrative commenced. That specific maps, particularly those connected to Templar traditions, hinted too closely at something concealed beneath the ice, and the powers that be deemed the world unprepared for such a revelation. However, a more grounded theory, perhaps more haunting, is that the knowledge existed, that it was transmitted, but then simply forgotten. Lost in translation, lost in suppression, lost in centuries of ink fading on parchment. Yet, modern echoes persist. During a 1949 debriefing of Operation High Jump, a U.S. military expedition to Antarctica, several documents reportedly referenced areas to avoid based on earlier European mappings. These documents were classified. Their phrasing was vague, but within them appeared a curious phrase: historical pre-claims, not by Spain, not by Britain, but by unnamed parties. Whispers again. And one final, easily overlooked detail. In 1960, a Chilean researcher named Ernesto Vidal published a concise paper on anomalies in Renaissance cartography. He noted that while most early European maps had expunged the southern continent by the 1600s, several Persian and Arab maps from the same period preserved it almost exactly as the Piri race map once did. Vidal termed this the cartographer's divergence, and suggested that some knowledge may have simply changed custodians. This leads to the ultimate open question: if the knowledge survived, who now possesses it? It is convenient to believe that silence implies ignorance, but in historical analysis, silence frequently signifies control. The Templars may not have openly declared what they discovered. They may have conveyed it through symbols, compasses, star charts, and rituals. And when the tides of power shifted, they may have entrusted that silence to others: the Order of Christ, the Jesuits, the Freemasons, the Vatican, and perhaps even the private entities currently funding expeditions. So, the maps disappeared, the lines were erased. However, knowledge, once drawn, leaves an indelible shadow. As we embark upon the final segment of this mystery, that shadow deepens. For if the Templars possessed knowledge of Antarctica, if they preserved even fragments of its outline, then the question is no longer whether they reached it. The question is, what did they discover beneath the ice? As one contemplates this narrative, the southern wind howls across an infinite expanse of white. Yet, beneath this silence, something stirs an echo of footsteps long faded, a whisper not entirely erased. Beneath the ice, a story lies dormant, and tonight, we may be poised to awaken it. We have pursued a trail spanning centuries, from a fragment of parchment on an admiral's desk to crusader strongholds in the Levant, from radar echoes in the Ross Sea to forgotten volumes sealed behind Vatican doors. And consistently, like a spectral presence at the periphery, the Red Cross appears observing, waiting. It would be facile to dismiss all of this as mere coincidence, that the map was misinterpreted, that the ancient texts were products of imaginative flourish, that the Templars, despite their immense power, were simply knights with little inclination for cosmology or cartography. However, when these disparate fragments are carefully juxtaposed, a discernible shape begins to materialize. And that shape bears an uncanny resemblance to the jagged coastline of Queen Maud Land. The Templars were intimately familiar with the concept of secrecy. They employed encrypted communications, constructed edifices according to sacred geometries, and concealed treasures not solely in gold but in knowledge, embedding it within chapel murals, architectural alignments, and initiation rites. If they had encountered maps, perhaps during the sacking of Byzantine libraries or through interactions with Islamic scholars in Jerusalem, it would not have been in their nature to disclose them openly. They would have guarded this information, discreetly replicated it, and transmitted it only to those who had sworn an oath of secrecy. By the time the Vatican turned against them, that knowledge would have already been moved. The last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, endured his final days under torture, but never revealed information regarding lost libraries, secret maps, or southern voyages. However, silence, within the Templar tradition, may have constituted the ultimate act of protection. In Portugal, the surviving Templars were re-established as the Order of Christ, and under Prince Henry the Navigator, they became the architects of the Age of Discovery. Their ships proudly displayed their insignia. Maps were meticulously drawn and redrawn. Yet, there was still no explicit mention of Antarctica. Even as their navigators charted the coasts of Africa and traversed the Atlantic, that southernmost land remained unspoken, as if deliberately withheld, as if awaiting a specific moment. One by one, modern discoveries appear to validate this ancient silence. Ice core samples reveal traces of soot and pollen, indicating that fires burned and plants grew long before conventional human records suggest such possibilities. Magnetic anomalies hint at massive, artificial structures buried deep beneath the surface. Satellite imagery, subsequently expunged from public view, is rumored to reveal lines too rectilinear to be natural, curves too perfect to be accidental. And radar scans, initially leaked, then retracted, depict patterns beneath the Ross ice shelf that seem to correspond to pre-glacial coastlines or ancient foundations. Could the Templars have possessed this knowledge? Could they have preserved a fragment of a forgotten epic from an era when ice had not yet claimed the southern pole? Consider once more the Portolan charts, the precision of their coastlines, the accurate angles of their harbors. These were not fortuitous guesses. They were fundamentally geodetic, implying the use of tools or references far exceeding medieval capabilities. And if such accuracy was attainable in the Mediterranean, then who can definitively state what else those cartographers observed, what they copied from crumbling scrolls or ancient mariners' lore, what they whispered about in the stillness of a stone keep or committed to ink, intended only for trusted eyes. Even today, research stations in Antarctica report peculiar occurrences, equipment malfunctions, inexplicably drifting compass readings, and entire sections of the landmass declared off-limits, not due to challenging terrain, but because of specific research protocols. And still, the central question persists. Why do multiple ancient maps appear to depict a coastline that modern science insists remained unknown until 1820? If this were a fictional narrative, the answer would be self-evident. The Templars discovered something. They transported it westward, concealed it beneath layers of myth, sealed it within lodges and rituals, and patiently waited. However, this is not fiction. The maps are demonstrably real. The voyages are historically recorded. The silence is documented. The trails, though cold, are traceable. Thus, we arrive at a threshold, not of definitive proof, but of compelling possibility, not of myth, but of hidden memory. The Templars may never have physically set foot on Antarctic soil, yet they may have preserved something that originated from there. A chart, a narrative, a remnant of a world eradicated by ice. Perhaps they comprehended the truth. Perhaps they feared it. Or perhaps they revered it. One final consideration. An obscure Templar gravestone discovered near Tomar, Portugal, bears a carved symbol, a sphere divided by a central cross, encircled by what appear to be ice caps. Most historians dismiss this as stylized cosmology. However, for those who are attuned to its subtle implications, it bears a remarkable resemblance to a globe, and not merely any globe, but one harboring a frozen secret at its southern extremity. There, beneath the red cross, lies the last great unknown. The wind now softens, swirling across the icy expanse like a lullaby whispered by time itself. The storm has passed, the fire has dimmed, yet deep beneath the silence, the mystery endures. One visualizes it again, that jagged curve at the bottom of an ancient map, ink drawn on animal skin half a millennium ago, coastlines matching those that no one should have observed. It is not merely uncanny, It is deeply intimate, as if someone once knew those shores firsthand, not from satellites or sonar, but from direct memory. One traces the path once more, deliberately, from the dusty shelves of a forgotten archive where a parchment map alludes to southern lands, to the creaking timbers of Templar ships traversing uncharted oceans, to candlelit chambers where Freemasons softly recite ancient prayers, to modern bunkers where digital scans flicker across screens and individuals in laboratory coats articulate carefully worded half-truths. It all invariably converges, returning to the ice, returning to a continent cloaked in white, guarding its secrets not only beneath snow but also beneath layers of narrative. Perhaps the Templars never physically touched Antarctic soil. Perhaps they merely heard of it, or dreamt of it, or discovered something, a scroll, a carving, a legend that sufficiently informed them of its profound significance. And so, they carried the silence forward, not to obliterate the knowledge, but to meticulously protect it. For some truths are not destroyed. They are buried, preserved, encased in ritual, transmitted from hand to hand through the corridors of time, awaiting a moment such as this. One exhales. The stars above the pole are unfamiliar, scattered like forgotten runes across a black velvet sky. The auroras pulse and fold like veils drawn across a cathedral of snow. And somewhere, beneath that sacred dome of cold stone, a wall, a chamber, a circle etched with symbols that no living person today would comprehend, may still slumber. Not yet, but perhaps one day, someone will dig deeply enough, question persistently enough, listen attentively enough. And when they do, they may discover that the final chapter of the Templar story was never interred in Europe at all. It was hidden beneath the ice. Further consideration of these compelling historical enigmas is encouraged